Today, I'm excited to welcome Joseph Wallace to the podcast. I first met Joe during my first deployment, and since then, he's had an incredible career. Joe served nearly 10 years as a Force Reconnaissance Marine, including time as an undercover asset combating drug and human trafficking. He was also regional SWAT Team Leader and later founded a successful tourism cooperative in SoCal. As an executive consultant for Afterburner Inc., Joe worked with Fortune 500 leaders, and now he leads Strategic Flow Consulting, helping guide and inspire other professionals. It's truly an honor to have you here, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. Also, just for a heads up for anyone listening during this podcast, if at some point you hear me call him Doc, that's the only name I knew him by for quite a while. So you might hear that a couple times.
No worries. Yeah. Doc, Manny, whatever works.
That's right.
Yeah, man. Dude, just like it's been a long time, first off, because I mean, my first deployment was 2016, and that was when we first met and had some fun on the island and spent a little time in South America there. But man, your career has been crazy after that. So give me a little recap as far as what we kind of haven't seen each other and what that's been like.
Yeah, absolutely. So that deployment actually was one of my last. I had one more after that, also to South America, before I completely got out of the Marine Corps. A lot of reasons for me doing that. I had a great career as a Force Reconnaissance Marine. I mean, Uncle Sam taught me how to jump out of planes, rock climb, ski, you name it, man. I mean, it was a good career, a lot of great people. Just made a choice to switch my life up a bit, got out. I went to school for a while and then got bored of school. And so I was like, man, I got to do something different. Went out, started a business in San Diego area. And it was a cooperative for tourism industry that really just exploded sales for a lot of different companies. It was a lot of fun. And then I had a family member get sick. So I was like, all right, I got to move up to be closer to them in Washington State. Ice cold Washington State. You know, you get used to deploying to Mexico and Colombia and Afghanistan, and then I end up in like dang near Canada. But once I got up here, kind of crazy story how this happened, but it's not very pertinent. But I found my way into law enforcement. Ended up working on a federal task force that combated mostly like organized cartel operations and then also human trafficking. Have a lot of wild experiences from that. Got some just absolutely incredible training, mentorship from some just really, I mean, the kind of stuff people write books about, you know, and to the point where I'd be in some circumstances and be like, this can't be real. Am I watching a TV and fell asleep having a dream? Like, what's going on? So yeah, I had some great experiences there. At the same time, I did my SWAT time on a regional SWAT team because that's a partial duty thing. And I worked my way up, held a lot of positions, including became a sniper on the SWAT team. I never did any sniper work in the military. Got to do it on the law enforcement side. Eventually became a SWAT team leader and then a coordinator for all training. And man, I learned a lot, mostly from mistakes. You know, one of the things, and this is consistent for my business now, is that I tried initially to bring in military style leadership, right, to this SWAT team. Well, not everyone on a SWAT team has been in the military, and I hit my head against a wall of bricks real fast because I wanted everything to be just like the Marine Corps, and it just doesn't work. And what that's translated now, fast forward to my company, is yes, it's a military lessons from military experience, especially in the kind of special operations world. But I fully understand you can't jam down the throats of civilians military style life. You know, they're not doing that. Maybe they did at one point in their life, but now they're at home, they're civilian, they don't want that. So you have to make some adjustments. And I was really fortunate that at a certain point, and it's funny, I say fortunate, and this next part, people are going to go, that doesn't sound fortunate. I got diagnosed with a brain disorder 2 years back, and it led to me losing my law enforcement career. It just, for health reasons, I couldn't do it anymore. And that really stung. That was like a life-changing moment. Now what? What do I do? I had been military law enforcement my whole life. I didn't really know anything else. And some good friends hooked me up with a company that I still work with, and I want to plug them right now, Afterburner Incorporated. They're a fantastic company. What they do is they take mostly fighter pilots, but also some special operators, and they do very similar to what I'm doing now with my company, but they do it for big guys, Fortune 500, your Googles, your Pfizers, the kind of companies you see in the news. And a couple of those people took me under their wing, taught me a little bit more on the business side and how to better apply some of these military style, I guess, leadership concepts or operational concepts to business. And that was a huge learning experience, made a lot of great connections with some really incredible business leaders in our country and abroad as well. I actually, we can talk about that story later, but I got to work with the number one phone company in Bulgaria for a while. And that was just a crazy experience. Really beautiful, wonderful country. But that's a tangent. Point being, after trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I started doing the consulting for Afterburner. And then I got tired of living out of my suitcase because that thing had me on the road all the time. And then I started thinking about some of my friends that run small businesses back up here in Spokane, Washington, where I'm from. And they were dealing with a lot of the same problems that I was seeing with these Fortune 500 companies. The only difference is they don't have a ton of money to drop on training and consulting. And, these are small businesses that are living, month to month and just trying to get by in a very challenging economy. They're not in charge of thousands of people. They're in charge of like 5 or 15 or maybe 20, and they don't realize, but they're same solutions that work for these big guys work for the small guys. But I get it. They can't afford this. They can't afford the consulting, right? It's usually an expensive thing for these Fortune 500 companies. So I said, well, what the heck? If I don't have to travel everywhere, why don't we start supplying the same knowledge to small businesses at a small business price level? And that's what we did. So started Strategic Flow Consulting, focusing on small and medium businesses. We do stuff either virtually. We do some stuff in person, like in-person team training. We do leadership training for managers, supervisors. And then I also offer a like direct mentorship, leadership mentorship for business leaders themselves. My biggest thing with starting this company, when I rebuilt my methodology, if you stole from me, you stole twice, because I took from a bunch of different people, right? And kind of looked into it and figured out what worked. I studied these high performing teams, not just in the military and in law enforcement, but I got to work with NFL football teams. Worked with some really impressive researchers at Stanford University, and just tried to find, okay, what are these high performing teams? What's the consistent thing I'm seeing between them? And that's where we built the methodology, and it has been just extremely successful. I've been super happy with it. We are a little unique in that we're getting away from a lot of the corporate buzzword kind of training. That's not what I want to be about. Our training is a very real kind of in your face. This is how it is to manage human beings, right? And that's the problem that I see a lot when I come to these small businesses, is they don't realize, if they were going to say, hey, you're a plumber, I'm going to train you to be a plumber. Well, think about everything that goes into being a plumber. All the essentially classwork, studying stuff, and then the hands-on experience, the apprenticeship, and then, you slowly work your way up in the levels. That makes sense because plumbing is a very specific, unique job. Well, why don't we do that for being a leader? Most companies, they say, okay, you're the manager now. Why? Well, you've been here the longest. There's really no one else who wants to do it. Just make sure you fill out these forms every Friday and you're good. And that's the extent of our leadership training. And I mean, it's no wonder. Really, in our culture, I really do feel like we're in a crisis of leadership right now, from the top down, because people aren't treating leadership as an actual skill, as something to train, as something that you have to hone over the years and gather information from other mentors. They treat it as just a position you get thrown in, and so that's why we're seeing a lot of problems in organizations. And I really feel like every single problem I've run into so far, you know, this is anecdotal, but every problem I've run into with my clients, I can always trace it back to leadership. So that's definitely been our focus. It's been a fun journey so far. And it's nice because, you know, and you know this, being in the military, from age 18, my career path was very like calling driven. You know, it wasn't just a job. Believe, you know, you, like I said, you know this, that the military lifestyle is not just a job, man. It is a complete calling. And then I did the same thing in law enforcement. And now, once again, I feel very fortunate. And that's why I say, yeah, okay, it has to do with me getting diagnosed with a brain disorder. But at the end of the day, I feel fortunate because I've found a new calling. And to see the impact that true leadership training and mentorship can have on organizations top to bottom has just been really fulfilling, really fun. But yeah, so that's kind of the background of how we got started at Strategic Flow Consulting. It's still new. We're still definitely growing and expanding. Got only one person that works for me right now. She's wonderful. Does all my paperwork stuff I don't want to do. So
Gotcha. Dude, that's awesome, man. First off, congratulations. Small business, super, super hard. Anything in entrepreneurship I found extremely challenging. Um, Honestly, a lot of the stuff that you're saying as far as why you started your business is actually very similar to why I started my business. So Omni HR, I found that working for like large, medium-sized organizations, the HR kind of stays the same. You know, every HR department's going to be different, but really there's the core functions that have to be done. And then out of those core functions, the smaller companies aren't able to invest in the scalability that HR brings because they just don't have the funds. But realistically, like they can still use the same tactics, they can use the same tricks, they can use the same recruiting, the sales, the ideas of like building a team, having your compliance solid, like all that has to work together. And that really is what brings scale to a business. And I personally really enjoyed HR after I left the military. Funny story on that as far as why I left, but when I finally left the military, I was kind of just like, all right, I got my MBA on my third deployment, or at least I started working on it, finished it after I got out. What exactly am I going to do with this? Originally, I was trying to go towards like hospital admin because as a corpsman, you know, I wanted to stay in the
right.
medical field kind of, but decided to go business route, decided to go HR. I really enjoyed that path. For me, it's actually funny you said that the training development, the mentorship, that's what like really resonated with me. Like I really enjoyed that aspect. And you are so right about the leadership not being there. People just get thrown into the
Dude,
positions. They don't
it's a
get any
problem.
training. It gets crazy. Like it's so insane that you could just get someone and be like, you're our highest sales performer. So you're probably a good sales director, right? Here you go. It's like, no, like the same, like the skills that require you to be good at a job are not the same skills that require you to be good as a leader or a manager. So I'm really interested as far as for your take on that. What are some of the things that you saw like from the military that you had to change? Like I know you said you had a little bit of like headbutting when you went to the SWAT teams and stuff like that, where they didn't want, was it like the regulation? Was it like the time frame? Like what was it that you were like, this isn't working? We have to kind of change the dynamic to make it fit for everyone here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It would, you know, it's funny, and I'll start with the conclusion, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more. My conclusion, what I came to was, it's not that all these things that are in that military style don't work wonderfully. They really do. It's about your communication style. How are you communicating? How are you convincing people to essentially fall in line, you know, to use a term from military jargon? How are you convincing them to fall in line? Because in the military, it's pretty easy to convince them because it's, hey, buddy, you signed on the dotted line. You do what I tell you to now. Okay, roger that, right? Well, you don't get that in the civilian world, especially, you know, when I started my company, the job market was pretty great. So if you piss off your people, they're going to say, fine, I'm leaving. I'm going to go get paid more at a different company, you know? So I couldn't do that in the Marine Corps. You couldn't do that in the Navy, right? It's like that is not an option. So really the solution was to not necessarily change a lot about the concepts and the style of leadership that comes from military, but to change the style of communication. And I want to touch on something, a couple words that you used that I'm so glad you used them, because I never hear this from people in this realm. You said the words tricks and tactics. Now, to some people, they hear that and they go, tricks? Well, that sounds nefarious. Like, oh, you're tricking people into stuff? No, that's just the word we have in English. There's probably something better out there, but hey, I'm a Marine, man. We eat crayons for dinner, so don't ask me about my vocabulary. Point being, yes, you are tricking people, right? That's what leadership is, essentially, is you are inspiring, and maybe that's another word, inspiring people to do a certain thing that they would not do on their own. If it wasn't for the fact that they were getting paid, or maybe regardless of pay, how far do you want them to excel? You're kind of tricking them, and you're using tactics. And that is very specific to the training that I provide. I was fortunate enough to get some really cool trainings when I was both in the military and in law enforcement in sometimes I hesitate to use the term because, again, people get scared of it, but kind of social engineering stuff. When you're going to a foreign country and you're training them, and you know this obviously from just even the deployment we were on together, and you're training them, what's your goal as a U.S. military member? Well, you say, well, our goal is to get their internal, they call it a foreign internal defense mission, right? Like, we're getting their defense, one of our allies' defenses better trained. Okay, yes, that's the goal, but what's the real goal? At the end of the day, you're not there for, let's say we're in Mexico. You're not there for Mexico. You're there for the United States of America. So really what you're doing is you're convincing these people to achieve more, right? Or achieve more in their military so that it can benefit the United States. Well, what are you doing as a business leader? You're motivating, you're using tactics, tricks, if you want to call them that. You're using those to convince them to perform at a higher level. And so I love that you use those words, because I think people get scared to talk like a normal human being when they're talking about business. I've got this, one of our first ads that we're going to be putting out soon. And I've just going over it a little bit ago, actually. And that's all it is it's kind of a funny ad, just talking about this corporate jargon and these buzzwords that you have to say, but no one really knows what the heck they mean, And it's refreshing to hear someone just use plain speak, like, hey, this is the reality of dealing with human beings. And I think that too often that gets lost. And to go back to your original question about, lessons learned bringing a military style leadership model to a civilian world, it was communication, like I said. But that in place, the style works. And it does take some convincing for people. You're going to get some people. I've gotten some people, they're veterans, and they're like, yes, please, thank you. I've been preaching this, but no one's been listening. And they love it. But I get other people that are just like, I even get some people that really don't like the military, that have a negative perspective of our armed forces. And, I respect everyone's opinion. That's the beauty of our country, is you get to have that opinion, right? But I really love the challenge of getting those people to come to my side and go, all right, I may have a negative view of this entity, but gosh dang it, they get results. You can't deny that, right? So yeah, I really think it just comes down to communication. This stuff works, but I can't go out there and start yelling at clients like a drill instructor. That's not going to win anything over. You can do that in the military because they don't have a choice. They can't leave, right? You got a captive audience. So it's really just a change in communication, man. Definitely just change in communication. There are things that you and I know that we learned, that we did from the military, that it's really hard to communicate that to someone who's never experienced it, someone who's never lived in it, right? And I'm not just talking about the experiences, but even just the way we lived our lives, how we organized our lives. You get all these influencers you see now online, and they're like, if you want to have a good life, get up at 5 a.m. and do this and eat this way. And I'm like, man, this is all stuff that I could just say, well, go be a grunt in the boot camp or something, I mean, like, that's what you're doing, right? So I found a way, using some of the trainings that I got, both military, but mostly law enforcement, in how to really effectively communicate and get people to follow this system without them even knowing they're following the system. You know, when I first started, I remember one training very specifically. I love talking about my failures because they're hilarious. And I got in there and I'm all motivated. I've got this new methodology. I really did believe in it. And I start preaching it in this training, right? You know, I'm like, yes, I am on the pulpit. Like, this is awesome. And all of a sudden I start getting just ripped to shreds during the Q&A section. And they're just like, well, this wouldn't work because of that. This one. And my instinct from the military is like, shut up, sit down, do what I tell you to. And that was what I was feeling in that moment. So I really ended up just kind of fumbling through the rest of the presentation. And afterwards, in reflection, I'm like, man, I got to change something. And what I realized is, even though this stuff is so obvious to me, and it's probably obvious to someone like you who's been doing this a while, the way we deliver our messages is perhaps more important than the message itself sometimes. And that seems counterintuitive. But it can really, really change things. So I would say that that's the main driver behind my technique and getting people involved in my methodology, is a very, very, very specific style of tactical communication, which is not easy to do. Again, that's something that you have to be trained on, that you have to learn. And that's why I want to get this information out to small business owners that have a team of 5 people baking cupcakes, and that's it. You know, you don't have to lead a special operations team into Afghanistan in order to be a good leader. You know, one of the things, and I get on tangents, man, so feel free to cut me off, but things pop in my mind. One of the things I've dealt with a lot is I tell these stories, a lot of stories involved in my training, because I want people to know that, hey, I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. Like, this is from life experience, very serious experiences. But so I'm telling stories during trainings, and one of the things I run into is people say, well, hey, that's great, Joe, you know, awesome. You were doing special ops stuff. You did undercover work, saving human trafficking, taking out human trafficking operations. Because I just flip burgers, man. Like, what do you want? like, come on, dude, what are we talking about here? Like, this doesn't apply to me. This is just my whatever job. And I push back on that. And I mean this genuinely. I'm proud of my service. You know, I'm sure you are too. I'm proud of my time in law enforcement, doing the things that I did there. But I don't think that pride in your work, I don't think that value and honor in your work is dependent on the type of work. You know, Martin Luther King had this wonderful speech where he describes, hey, if you're a street sweeper, you know, which is, he's using that to be like kind of a lowly, you're literally out there just sweeping the street. Be the best dang street sweeper you can be. And there's so much wisdom in that. You know, at the end of the day, if you're a small business owner, if you're a manager at a small or medium business, your performance, there are jobs on the line based on your performance. What is a job? I can tell you, I've been out of work. At one point in my life, I spent 3 months homeless, living in the back of my truck because I just had nowhere to go. That's what a job is, man. It's keeping people away from that. So there is honor, there is power, there is immense value, and it's just as valuable, just as impressive as stories from a deployment in Afghanistan. I mean, going around every day and keeping a business running and providing employment and benefits and community for a group of people, that's how you change the world, man. That's how you change the world. So I have to push back against people that say that. And I don't know, maybe you're running that too with your talk, you know, bringing military stuff up. Sometimes people just shut off because they don't understand it. And it's not even like a disrespect thing. It's well, I just don't get this. So again, I come back to communication. How do we communicate the same concepts, but maybe in a very different way?
I gotcha. Yeah, man. When it comes to communication, I definitely get where you're coming from, because you're absolutely right as far as like the message can be great. Like what you're trying to say, the information, the content of the message can be top notch, but the presentation is everything. Because if you're not actually engaging in a back and forth conversation, or if you're not actually getting them to really buy in, which is really what leadership is all about. Like everything that you said, 100% agree with you. It's getting the team to buy into whatever the dream is. And as far as what you were saying as well, when it comes to like the team members, you're right, because they're the brand itself. Like when a customer comes in and you have a cashier at the front, that person represents the brand. Like if you look at McDonald's, you go and you speak to the cashier, that is the brand. Like because that affects your perception or as the consumer, your vision of the company as a whole. So 100%,
exactly.
dude. Yeah.
Like, when I'm buying a burger, I don't think of the CEO of McDonald's. Like that's not
exactly.
the image that comes to mind. I'm thinking of the 16-year-old kid who clearly is working his butt off behind that drive-through window. That's the image of McDonald's to me, is that kid, right? You know, so yeah, 100% agree.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's really easy to see too, like when it comes to like restaurants, because people go to them so frequently. It's like when you think of McDonald's, you think like, all right, quality control, like it's always the same whenever you go. When you think of Chick-fil-A, you usually think of like a higher tier kind of like restaurant chain. Service is super good. Like the customer service is always really positive. Like that's the thing. When you think of Waffle House, you think dinner and a show because you know something's about to go down when
It's
you
the
go
brand, man. The brand
exactly.
the brand is like a 2 a.m. thing of waffles. That's what the brand is.
Yep. And that is the team members buying into the culture that the leadership needs them to buy into. Like when you have McDonald's, you have McDonald's University, and then you have like all of this like structure to franchise and push out and all the development. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to is the leadership helping the team members buy into the end vision, and then do they actually give them the tools they need to reach that goal? Like I think that's really what leadership is. And it sounds like we're talking about the same thing when it comes to like buying in and believing in the mission and understanding that you are of value in whatever role you're in, because without you, there wouldn't be that role. Like that's the big thing that people don't understand, no matter what position they're in, is that if you weren't doing it, then like someone else would, number one. And then number two is if you weren't important, then they just wouldn't have you and they wouldn't have the role. So like everyone is there because they are mission critical. And it's something that just comes into people don't understand that. And I think it is a failure in leadership at the end of the day. Like if your team doesn't understand what like cog they are in the greater machine of the business, then you failed, right? Like as a leader, you did not show them that they're valuable. And I think that that's something that every leader can 100% use.
Yeah, 100% agree, man. And I think that it even goes further, because it's not just like, hey, you need to understand your role, but it goes to exactly what you said there, value. And every member who has objectively less flashy, less sexy role at the company, you need to create a culture where everyone, not just you one-on-one to this person, but the whole company believes that every single member has immense value. And without them, we would be missing something. And that's where cultural change comes in. I do see a lot of leaders that are trying to figure it out. They didn't get training. They didn't get actual leadership education, but they're trying, and they're smart people, and they're trying to figure out, what do. They are the to use the military example, right? They're the general who goes and shakes the hand of the private, and like, hey, buddy, how you doing? The private's like, oh my gosh, the general said hi to me. You know, it's like that's what they think is going to happen, when really the private's like, he doesn't care. I know he doesn't care. He's trying to be nice, but I know he doesn't care. He's not going to remember my name, whatever. So I think that the spirit of that is really good, because it's saying, hey, I want to make sure I know my people and that they know their value. But just doing that one-on-one goes back to communication, right? Like that one-on-one talk stuff, it's great, and it's maybe a part of it. But how about we change the culture to exemplify the fact that every single member does have immense value? And yeah, the president of the company may not know you by name and know your kid's name and know where you went on vacation last, but they do know your work, and they know that without you, they would be in need of somebody else. And if you create this culture, and I really do believe it starts with HR in most companies, because if you can, a lot of times HR they're kind of who drives the culture as much as maybe the leadership thinks they do. It ends up being HR. And so it really does. It just does. That's kind of the way it's gone down. And I always found it funny, because HR is in charge of, I feel like when somebody doesn't know what to do with something, they're like, I don't know, give it to HR, they'll figure it out. But perhaps the most important thing they do is not even, I guess, written in their job description explicitly usually. And that's creating a culture that keeps the operation moving in the right direction.
Dude, I actually love that you said that, because one of the really big things is you're absolutely right. Like HR is kind of the decision maker of culture. The thing is that I like to say, like, HR is more of an advisor, because at the end of the day, the CEO is
Right.
going to make the decision. But the way that HR really affects culture there, it's actually really tactical there. So like the compensation benefits, like what are you bonusing on? What's your commission structure on? Like
Right.
that is going to base on what the people are going to care about. You've also got on the other side, like how good are your benefits? Are you offering 401k and like all that? Because that's going to kind of set the level of quality of your hires, right? And then you have the recruiting. Like, are you hiring the right people? Because anyone can be trained for any role, but is the person right for that fit, or for the company,
Right.
or for the culture itself? Like all these, the training development, like all that comes down to, are we structuring things in a way that people have the tools they need? So you're absolutely right. Like HR is scaling and it is developing the culture of the company. And I like to say the CEO has to be the shark. Like the CEO has to be able to see forward, see the future, understand what they need to get the company to the next level. HR has to be that advisor, that consultant that, one, focuses on the team. Like it has to have that human aspect. And at the same time, has to be able to back any other function of the company. Like it is the entire back office. It develops the culture. It helps with scaling. Like it does everything you need. So I actually love that you gave some kudos to the human resources there.
No, and I mean it, because I've seen it. I've seen it with companies that are Fortune 500 companies with, thousands and thousands and thousands of employees. And I've seen it with, mom and pop donut shop. I mean, it really does start. It starts with HR to get that done. And now I like that you said that, hey, at the end of the day, they're not the decision makers. And you're absolutely right, because this is the danger. And I preface this in my training. Listen, the programs, the systems that I'm going to put together for your company, one, you got to buy into it 100%, because if you do it halfway, it's actually probably going to cause more problems than solve them. And I don't want that for you as my client, right? So you got to do it 100%. If you do it 100% for a year and you say this doesn't work, then by all means get rid of it all and go do your own thing. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's your right as the owner of the business, supervisor, whatever it might be. But the thing about it, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this without exposing a client that I don't have their permission to talk about this, I guess. But say there was a client who bought in halfway, and my methodology involves a lot of cyclical systems. I tell business owners, I don't want to have you here in the office every day. My goal is to get you on a beach in Mexico while your business is running itself. Or maybe it's not a beach in Mexico. Maybe it's you want to start a second business. Maybe it's now you have more bandwidth to spend time with your family. That's my goal, is to get you there. I don't want you to have to micromanage this entity. Now, the danger of that is, if you don't follow through the methodology completely, you're going to have a company of people just running all different directions and doing whatever they want. And that's a problem. You got to have control. You still have to have the final decision maker, like you said, right? Like if you're leading a group, you have to have your advisors, but the advisors have to have that one point they go to and go, this is the person that makes the final decision. And then the hard part is the communication between all that. How well is HR communicating with the C-suite executives, with the president, vice president of the company? How well are they communicating? How effectively is the vision and culture that the leadership wants getting funneled through HR to the rest of the company? And that problem could be in anywhere along that line. It could be that your message is off, which, to be honest with you, that's one of the bigger problems I deal with these leaders. They've got their mission statement. They've got their message of how they want to build a culture, but it's not very well designed. At least it's not designed with the understanding of the tactics and tricks that you and I talked about, to get people to do what you need to get done. And so sometimes that's where the breakdown is. Sometimes the breakdown is HR doesn't like what your vision is, and so they're going to make their own vision. That's a problem too, and you gotta go in there and fix that real quick. Sometimes, yeah, they're on board, but the people aren't receptive. It's not working, and they're not being honest with leadership and saying, "Hey, this isn't working, and this is why we think it's not working." Again, that all comes back to leadership. Are you the type of leader that your HR manager feels comfortable walking in and telling you, "Hey, I know this is your message that you're trying to get. This is your culture and builds. It's not working. Here's the reasons why." And then are you comfortable as a leader saying, "I don't care. You're actually wrong about that, but go forth and do what I tell you to," because you got to have that type of relationship, right? Like, that's hard to have. Again, we're talking about very difficult conversations, and we don't even realize how difficult they are. The power dynamics, the fact that people's jobs are on the line. The biggest problem is the human ego. We are just totally egotistical, narcissistic beings. That's what a human is. That's how we've survived and made our way to the top of the food chain, is because we're constantly thinking about our self preservation. And so people do that now, and it's hard to get people to step out and look at, okay, well, what's good for the company as a whole. I just had a conversation with a gentleman who works for the American Red Cross, and I do have his permission to, I won't throw his name out there, but to talk about this situation. It's out there. It's public knowledge. You can look it up. But they had a gal come in and took over after 9/11. The Red Cross failed miserably. They did a horrible job. They wasted tons of money, and it wasn't because they were doing anything nefarious. They weren't. They were really trying to help people, but their organization as a nationwide nonprofit was lackluster, to say the least. And they ended up with a huge inflow. The American people are extremely generous people. So they reached a point, seriously, where they said, what do we do with all this money? We lost all this blood that we had sit on the shelves because we didn't need that much blood. Turns out 9/11, they really didn't need that much blood for transfusions. And yet they got a bunch of blood. So they end up wasting it. And so the board there started looking at, like, okay, we need to be better stewards of our donors' money and make sure it's going where they want it. So they end up hiring this gal. She comes in, completely turns things upside down, really, and does it in just an absolutely impressive way. It's a great case study. If you ever get some downtime, read up on it. And her name is actually, I'm spacing her name right now, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but she's absolutely brilliant. She totally turned the Red Cross around. And now I would say the Red Cross is the gold standard for charitable organizations, and the fact that how they operate. Again, this is one of the high performing teams that I've looked at and found consistencies. And man, they're hitting all four of my pillars. Like, I'm going bing, bing, bing. Yep, they got it. Like, they figured it out. So that was really cool to talk to them about that. Sometimes it takes big changes, like, big shifts, and those aren't always easy. One of the things she did is she cut, I think it was like 70% of their paid positions for the company. Oh. Now, she did it in a very good way. She did it right. She took care of the people the best way that she could. At the end of the day, she's like, we're paying all these people to do nothing. Why are we doing that? And it's because organizations, as they grow, they turn into this like bureaucratic bloat, right? Like, where everyone is just interested, to go back to ego, in protecting their job, protecting their department. And it no longer becomes about the overall mission. And one of the cool things that, I know you can know this, right? Like, you saw it in the military too. And I saw it with a lot of my brothers in arms in the special operations world. Oh, if you're not in the teams, you're nobody. It's like, bro, you realize where that water you got on your back came from, right? I like to tell this story. I met this guy in my first pump in Afghanistan, and I was a cocky little sucker, man. I had just gotten into the recon community. I was jacked, just metabolism of a 20-year-old, I was doing great, man. I was so full of myself. I needed to be humbled, and believe me, I would be humbled several times in the years to come. But I meet this guy at one of our forward operating bases, and I'm just kind of chatting. Seemed like a cool dude, and we're on some downtime, no mission. And Like, all right, bro, what do you do? What's your MOS, your military occupational? And he goes, well, I'm a water dog. And I'm like, the heck's a water dog? Well, those of you who don't know, Marine Corps or Marines have a history of being called devil dogs. And there's a whole story behind it that I won't get into, but they're called devil dogs. So this Marine calls himself a water dog. I'm like, what the heck's a water dog? Well, I get talking to him, and his whole job in the Marine Corps was to make sure that Marines have potable water. That was his whole job. And he did everything from the logistics of getting the water there, from testing water, from purifying water, storing water properly, allocating where the water goes. I mean, it was a lot to his job. And I was really fortunate in talking to him because he kind of had that, well, I'm just a water dog. I'm just a, whatever that. And he's sitting here talking to this recon Marine. And I thought about it, and I'm like, dude, I love water, and it's like 120 degrees. Like, without you, bro, I might die. Like, so at the end of the day, my whole mission success it can be traced back to a lot of things, but it can definitely be traced back to that water dog, because when I take that sip of water out there in the field, I wouldn't have that without this guy. So I like to tell that story to just kind of reiterate that every role has extreme value. And even if you think you're pretty hot, I'm the HR manager of this company, I'm starting to wear nicer suits, I'm starting to make some good money, these little peons don't know. It's like, hey man, you're going to get humbled real quick when one of them leaves, and then you're gonna be like, oh crap, no, actually I really needed that person. Where's my water, man? I can't go on. Yeah, I love having these conversations, man, because managing people, understanding people, we're so fascinating. We are just wild monkeys, man. Like it's so fascinating when you start delving into the science of it. And what I tell people is, hey, you can either spend the next 12, 15 years of your life looking into this stuff and studying it, or you can just listen to my silly stories and you're going to have an understanding. Listen to the methodology. There's reasons behind everything that we teach at Strategic Flow. And it's just culture, man. Culture. It's so big and people don't realize it. That's not to say, you mentioned a lot of other things that HR does. And these are important. A lot of times people think I'm going to come in and, like a bull in a china shop, man, just start breaking everything and say, let's turn this whole thing upside down. No, there are very important, I guess, like, what would you call that? Like systematic things you have to do to run a company, right? Like there are boxes that need checked at the end of the day. There just are. Sometimes there's legal reasons you have to check those boxes, right? Like there's law that you have to understand. And then also there's just good practice. And those things are still important. And I fully understand that. And that's why I specialize in the leadership side of it, the human management side. I don't pretend to know all the stuff that you go over, right, with your work. I don't know the ins and outs of HR. I really don't. I know leadership. So I'll teach you to be a good leader. You're going to take these tools, you're going to apply it to your specific role, to your specific industry. Believe me, I know what I don't know, man. And there's a lot of stuff I don't know. Now, the good part is I can always put you in touch with someone, right? It's like, hey, I don't know, but let me call Doc Martinez, man. Like he knows about this stuff. So I'll give him a call and then we'll see if I can't, set that up. So, that's definitely an important part as well.
Yeah. I mean, I actually really like that you said that you're like, because honestly, you can't be a subject matter at everything. Like you can't be an expert at every single thing. It's literally not possible. So I really like the way that like you're upfront about that. And when it comes to your training, I actually am super interested. Obviously, I don't want you delving in too much to your secrets and stuff, but like, is it like, do you have a specific niche that like you assist with? I know you said small businesses around 5 employees. And then on top of like who you help, what's kind of like your process? Do you have like a set structure or is it customized based off what they need? Because like you said, there's so much that goes into business. I know you're focusing on just a leadership aspect. And is that like assisting with the business process itself? Or is it like focusing on this is what it takes to be a leader. This is how you communicate. This is how like we make sure that people really are bought in. Like, because I mean, that in itself is an entire process. So I'm really curious about like your specific idea and process when it comes to your training.
Yeah. So to start off with your first question, there is no specific niche industry that I work with. If you are working with a team, I'll work with you. Everything we do is completely customized. I only take on a small level of clients per month. And the reason for that is I believe that if you're going to hire me, you deserve my full attention. So really, I don't do a lot of clients because I like to dive deep. This is very transformative training. This is not, everyone's been to those corporate meetings where they do the annual training and it's like a rah fest and, oh, we should be better at this. Okay, but we're not. So anyways, let's get back to work, right? This is not that. Like, this is, hey, we are going to change the way you run your business. And so I don't take on that many clients. But as long as you're running a team, as long as you're involved running a team, I'm there for you, because that's really where my product shines, is in leadership, in managing humans. And to that point, I don't just work with businesses. I actually, part of the reason I got on this is I started just pro bono doing some training for local school sports teams. I just happen to have some connections to some coaches and like athletic directors and stuff. And they're like, hey, we want to bring someone in to kind of inspire some of our student athletes on leadership stuff. So I was like, cool, let's do it. My goal, actually, and this will be the first time I'm putting this out there, it's certainly not ready yet, but my goal next year is we're starting a program. It's going to be the foundation of a nonprofit. And the whole idea that I'm going to use is, for every training that I provide for a business, a paid training, it's going to provide one free training for a school around here. And I might even start traveling with that, because really, man, there's nothing more impactful than teaching that stuff to young people, right? They're not already set in their ways. They're still a little bit malleable, a little bit open to it. And so being able to spread that is really cool. But so yeah, really, anybody that's running a team, we're there for you. Very customized process. I qualify my clients very strictly. It's not, it sounds kind of stupid, but it's not easy to be one of my clients, because again, I believe in this system. I know it works, but I also know it doesn't work if you don't buy into it. So I've had a few clients that call me like, hey, I'm kind of interested, or I just want to do some training for this. I've got some extra money in my budget. And usually I don't take on those clients, because I'm like, hey, man, this whole system is like, we are flipping everything on its head, and that sounds scary to people, and I get it, but I want them to be a little scared at first. So really, as long as you're open to buying into this system, and I don't ask you to be open until after several conversations that we have, because you don't know it yet, right? But that said, I have found myself offering very specific things over the years, things that people consistently ask for. One, I provide a really cool, if you're up in the Northwest, I had one other one I did in Texas that they just really wanted me to come down. I was like, all right, cool. It was a cool company, great group. So I wanted to work with them. But we do really cool team building exercises, and it's not the systematic overhaul. It's just, hey, we're here to, one, have fun. People learn better when they're having fun. But I use some of those tactics and techniques to sneak in some pretty impactful lessons into that team building exercise stuff. So I've done several of those. That's a pretty consistent ask. I do management training. So I have one client right now that all of their managers, one of the parts of their mandatory training is they have to either come to me or I go to them, or virtual, whatever, but they have to get my basic leadership intro course. So what that entails is going over the 4 consistencies of high performing teams, or as I call them, the 4 pillars, a brief introduction to each of those. And then they get to kind of be involved in a discussion, usually with some other leaders that I bring in from either Fortune 500 companies, military, law enforcement organizations. And they get sort of some pretty cool, I guess you just call it Q&A sessions with those people. And then I also offer like large scale trainings. So like company wide trainings. Most people every year they have, annual sales meeting or something like that. So I've done several like conferences where I'm just one of the keynote speakers, and that one's been pretty popular as well. My favorite one to do, and I don't get a whole lot of these, but when I do, they're just super impactful, is the one-on-one mentorship. So right now, I only have a handful of clients. I think I've got 3. My promise in this program is I'll never take more than 5. But I've got 3 people right now that are in direct mentorship with me on leadership. So what that entails is access. You got something come up and you need to work through it with someone that understands this style of leadership, this system that you've bought into. Call me. I literally give them my personal phone number. They give me a call anytime they need. And then when they come up against new projects or operations, they lean on me pretty heavy for the mentorship through that. And I actually have a methodology system, a framework system for project management. And it is, I love the system. And so far, everyone I've talked to loves it. And the reason I love it is, again, I'm a dumb Marine, man. Like you gotta make it simple for me. What I've found in a lot of trainings, and again, this is one of my Joe tangents I get on, right? A lot of these trainings that are out there, and I'm not going to say any specific ones, but there are some really good information. There's some really good information out there. There's a lot of people that I've pulled from their training, but there's also a lot of bad out there. And the ones that I see that just aren't very good, they seem to have this idea that the more buzzwords they use, the more they talk, the more they just over-explain stuff, somehow that makes them smarter. And what they don't realize is I never watch the presenter. I watch the crowd. And you look out in the crowd and you see doing that number, they're on their phone, they're talking to each other because they're checked out, because they know this is just some mandatory meeting thing they got to go to. I've never seen that at one of my presentations, partially because I'm a little loony and a little like bounce around a lot. Like I said, I got a brain condition, man. You got to give me a break there. But I'm always keeping people on their toes. But yeah, that's just a little aside, I guess. But really, to answer your question in full, it's customized. What do you need? What the first meeting I have with my clients, and like I said, like you said, we're not going to get into methodology here. You got to pay me for that, suckers. Like, this is not a free ride. Okay, I got bills to pay. But what I will say is that that first call with my clients is I don't even really talk, and which is kind of funny right now. You're listening to me like, dude, this guy never stops talking. But but during my call, I don't really talk, man, because I just want to hear where you at, what's going on with your team, your company, your department in the organization, whatever it is. It's like I just want to hear what's going on. And I'm very good at interviewing, again, because of those tactics and techniques. I've interviewed murderers, I've interviewed cartel members. Getting information out of them is really a challenge. So getting information out of people who want to talk about their work, to me, it's pretty easy. and you can learn a lot from those conversations. And I don't, it's not, it's like an interrogation in a way, really. And people think interrogation, they think James Bond and you're like tied to a chair and stuff like that. Real interrogation, the people that are good at it, whether it's the government, whether it's the FBI training that I've been through, they're not the mean hard guys. They're just talking. They know how to talk. And so I get out of that client call a really good picture of what that individual needs, what they're going through. And then it usually takes about a week, but I build a full proposal for them. And hey, this is what I think is going to work. Then we go through it again and they get to choose, hey, I really do like this, I do like that. And as long as it doesn't break out of what my methodology is, and we press forward. So I might have a client that says, I'm having these problems. I come back with a proposal, say, hey, here's the deal. You need some one-on-one mentorship, because honestly, a lot of this is coming back on you, bud, but also it sounds like your team needs probably just one training. Oh, okay. Well, I don't have the bandwidth to put on one training for my whole team, but let's do the mentorship. Oh, okay. That works. A lot of times I really like to pair up. If I'm training your managers, man, you got to get trained too. And I've actually I had this problem with a client this year. And it was a tough one because I didn't want to lose the client. I really didn't, but they did not want to participate or learn any of the information that I was teaching their top level managers at all. And I tried to work with them like, hey, you don't got to come to the training, but let me at least send you this basic info sheet that I have that kind of just so you understand what they're doing, because you're going to see them doing some weird stuff in your mind, right? And yeah, they just didn't want to do it. So that fell through. I never worked with that company, unfortunately. I take a lot of pride in my product, and I'm not going to let it go to someone that's not going to use it properly. Like I said, you got to buy in. And so, again, to reiterate my answer to your question, is there a niche? No. Is there a specific training that's like, hey, here's your package, take it or leave it? No, it's like it's customized, but the one requirement is I got to have buy-in. If you don't buy in, no one else is going to buy in your company, and you're just throwing your money away at me, to be honest, So that's the number one thing. Give me buy-in. Give me buy-in.
I gotcha. I mean, and you're absolutely right. Really, any large-scale strategic change in a company, it has to be bought in top down, because they're the ones that are going to have that accountability to make sure that any change, any transition actually works, right? Because like to make an actual successful change in business, you have to make the plan, you have to actually implement the change, you have to have controls in place to make sure you actually know what success looks like, what failure looks like. And then from there, have the accountability to keep people in place. And then after a certain amount of time, be like, is this working? Is this not? But if you don't know, or if you don't believe in it, like it's not going to happen anyways.
Yeah.
So I totally get what you're saying there. Yeah. Really,
Dude,
really awesome, dude.
I love that you're putting out the word accountability, man. Holy smokes. I never genuinely hear that in the business world. I hear responsibility, but I never hear accountability. And people don't realize
is everything.
It's everything. I will dabble a little bit in some of my methodology, but there is one section of what I call the triad of successful execution. And it comes down to three things: communication, adaptability, and accountability. And people are always on board with me for the first two, and then I drop the third on them. They're like, "Ooh, that's scary. I don't know about that, man." Because if it goes wrong, at the end of the day, someone is at fault, right? And extreme accountability is hard, and that goes back to what we started this whole conversation on: culture. To develop a culture of accountability. Now, people hear accountability and they think blame. It's not blame. Those are two very different things. Blame is it's an attack, really. It's his fault. It's a finger pointing. Accountability is, hey, you guys, the reason this didn't work is I did this and I realized that didn't work. And no one blames you. In fact, real good culture of accountability has zero blame. It's just accountability. It's just really stating the facts.
Yes.
Which sounds so simple, and it is so hard for people to do, to just state the facts. What happened? Why did this happen? How did that why happen to the what? It's just, it sounds simple, but it is a challenge. And there are tactics, there are techniques, there are communication styles that really will amplify your ability to create that culture of accountability in your teams. They're out there. I'm telling you, there's tools there. They work. People have spent a lot of money training people like me on this, and now it's time for me to pass that on to you guys, right? Like this is basic stuff reimagined.
Love it. I love it, man. Yeah, dude. Accountability is really everything. Like I 100% agree with you on that. And
have you heard the concept of red teaming?
No.
So this is a pretty popular one. I know Afterburner Inc. Again, great company. If you guys are looking for someone to do like big corporate events, call Afterburner Inc. These guys are awesome. The CEO goes by Boo. It's his call sign. He was a fighter pilot in Australia. Just a great dude. Super impressive guy. But anyways, they're big on this, called red teaming. And we would do this sometimes in the special operations community. And essentially you come up with this plan. You got an idea of where you want your company to go, or this new project you're about to launch, and you build this beautiful plan, and it's your baby. You're like, oh, I love this plan. This is going to work. It's going to be great. Red teaming is finding a group of people that have or would develop a very similar type of plan, but had zero influence or part in developing this specific plan. And you take it to them, you present it to them, and they tear you to shreds. They absolutely rip the plan apart. And honestly, it's funny because they don't know everything, right? So you just give them a presentation. And I always tell people 75% of what they say is crap. They don't know what they're talking about. But that 25% is probably going to be something you didn't think of. And you're going to go, oh, smokes. I didn't think of that. And again, this sounds simple, right? But what do people usually do when they have a plan? They look for confirmation. They don't look for accountability. They don't look for challenge. And so they'll go find the person that they know is just going to nod their head and go, yeah, that sounds really good. I really like your plan. Instead of the person who's going to go, yeah, I mean, it's pretty good, but what about this? You know, and there's a very specific way to do it. It's very ritualistic. In a proper red teaming, there's a reason for that. Again, without getting too deep into my methodology, but there is a ritual to red teaming, to debriefing, to briefing, to conducting a project in a proper way. And if you do it right and you use those tactics and techniques, I mean, you can really be impressed with the results you're going to have. But red teaming, it's a cool thing. Yeah, look into it. Look into it.
Right.
Fighter pilots are huge on it. They love red teaming. It's like they're more anxious to do the red team than to actually go out and fly a mission. It's hilarious.
That's hilarious. All right, yeah, I'll definitely check that out. That's definitely seems like a very interesting way to find conflict and then to find kind of those gaps, like you said, because that's really what it is. It's just an additional step to make sure that like everything's actually getting hit the right way. So that way, when you actually put the plan in place, things are taken care of, right? Like it's like a SWOT analysis. Like you have to identify the weakness, not just the strength. So I love the idea. So I have one last question for you here. If you had one tip, one trick, or just one thing that you would share with new or experienced leaders, what advice would you give them?
One tip, one trick. I think I'm going to go with, and this is probably just a more recent conversation I had, so it's front of mind. But young person placed in one of those supervisor roles because somebody had to do it, and this is just off on a conversation. They know what I do, and they go, "What's your advice, man? What do I do? I don't really know how to do this." And he said, "I wasn't born a leader." And I looked at him. I said, "Man, ain't nobody born a leader. Nobody is born a leader. That is something that we have concocted in our fairy tales as humans. Becoming a leader is training to be a leader. It's working to be a leader. It's developing yourself in a way so that you can be a leader." Nobody's born a leader. If you're going to sum it up in one line, nobody's born a leader. You got to train at it, man. You got to train at it. You think LeBron James was born a great basketball player? And actually, I think Kobe Bryant was one. I heard an interview with one of these famous NBA players, and they said it bothers them when people go, "Man, he was just born with all that talent." And he's like, "Born with all this talent?" He goes, "You didn't see me up until midnight shooting free throws. You didn't see me getting up at 4:30 running 5 miles." It's like, not to say that he didn't have some natural athletic ability. There are people with natural abilities in some things, yes. But to be truly great, I don't care how natural your ability is, you are going to have to put in the work. You are going to have to train. So again, nobody's born a leader. Train at it. Get some guidance, mentorship, get some education. I wish we could offer a major at a university that is literally just leadership. like this is the whole topic, guys. There's so much around it. But yeah, that's what I'd say, man. Nobody's born a leader.
Awesome. Joe, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so actually we just did a whole rebuild of the website. It's strategicflow.org or .net. I think we also have that domain. What you're going to notice if you go in the next week or so, it's going to say not secure or something like that. We're waiting on our certificate still. It takes forever. I'm hoping the certificate should be up by this weekend, but we'll see. But yeah, strategicflow.org. Got some basic info on there, a little bit more about my background. We're going to be launching some more social media stuff in the next few months because I am not a social media guy. So I got somebody helping me doing that now. And look up there, see if some of it resonates with you. I'll be honest. A lot of the website, it's hard to explain what we do on the website, right? So fill out that form. There's a form on there to get a consultation. It's totally free. give me a call. We'll just chat. Like I said, like I told you about those client calls, man. It's just you talking. So someone could totally take advantage of it and be like, man, I really don't want to hire this guy, but I just want to talk to someone for a while about this. I would do it, man. Just call me. I'm down. Let's talk. But yeah, fill that form out. Let's have a conversation. Just see where you're at. Even if you think, hey, things are going good, but could they be better? You know, could you improve? And if you're not the type of person that thinks they can improve, then, well, you're probably not the right client for me anyway. So yeah, just check out the website, fill out the form, reach out. Let's have a conversation.
All right. I love it. Joe, thank you so much for coming on. If you like the show, thank you so much for listening here all the way till the end. Please share. Thank you, guys.